Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of Indie Reads Aloud. Why do I say it's exciting? Because I get to do fun things like introduce you to new writers that I've never met before. Such is the case today with Samantha Moran. I am so excited to share her work with you. She and I met just in the green room today, and I already like her. I've already put her on my TBR list, and I think you guys should do the same thing. She has a brand new book that's just been released. This is super exciting. And I love being on the inside track on this kind of fun stuff. So Samantha, welcome to the program. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I love meeting new authors. I mean, this is why I do this, just so I can meet people like you. So let me introduce you to Samantha. She is a proud Magna Cum Laude graduate of Western Michigan University with a bachelor's in English education. Throughout her career, she has taught many English and language arts courses to students in middle school, high school, and college in urban and suburban settings. She's a loving mother of two amazing children. Let's see. I lost my place. I'm so excited to meet you. Okay. You know what? Here's the thing. You're an amazing person. You have a degree in English. You love writing. You've written 3 other books. And now your gigantic full-fledged novel. This is how many years in the making?
6, almost 6.
This is incredible. This is so cool. So I'm so excited. I can't even read the little bit of copy that I normally have. But if anybody's interested, head over to the show notes, check out all her fun stuff. You can also find Samantha's a link to her book and a link to her website and all that nifty stuff if you want to learn more. Samantha, the book you're going to read today is The Ruin, which is a medical, paranormal, urban fantasy. I love the combination of those 3 genres. It's very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Well, sure. This is The Ruin. It's coming out today, actually May 16th. And then obviously we'll show this to you a little bit later, but this is The Ruin. It's set in modern day Baltimore, and it's an urban fantasy in that it incorporates elements of Norse mythology, specifically a lesser known deity and a blood curse. But there's also a medical fiction component. The main character is trying to save her mother from stage 4 cancer. And they've reached the end of the line with traditional treatments like chemotherapy and radiation and surgeries. And the medical fiction component comes in where her mother's doctor offers her an illegal experimental treatment that she can choose to try to use to save her mother with no guarantees and a very high expense. And it's very dangerous. So you get a little bit of magic, a little bit of sci-fi,
a lot of
raw
tension.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us, because we might be having little tiny ears listening, do you have any listener advisories for the piece that you're going to read today?
I don't think I have any listener advisors for this part. There is a nightmare scene that has a hint of a little bit of gore, but nothing that's like explicitly gross. Mentions of blood, probably.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for that. I always like to give readers a heads up before they have their little people listening in. So if you are ready, pretty please take the microphone and read aloud.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be reading from chapters 1 and 2 of The Ruin today. There is a part at the beginning. It's kind of like a prologue that I'm going to skip, but it's basically a letter from the Centennial Bank of Baltimore where the main character has applied for some debt consolidation things and she's been denied. So that is in this book as well, but I won't be reading that one right now.
Excellent. So we get to dive right into the action. That's superb.
Right.
I'm looking forward to this.
All right, here we go. Chapter 1. And forgive me if I yawn. For some reason, I yawn when I read out loud, but
that's okay. You're allowed.
The thin white envelope shakes as I slide my finger beneath the seal. With each small tear, a foolish surge of hope washes over me. I take a deep breath and blow it out slowly, trying to steady my hands. This time will be different, I tell myself. Centennial Bank will help me. They have to. The response is a neatly folded letter, a single page. Before I even unfold it, I know this answer will be exactly like the rest. The reply is too short. My tired eyes scan the simple response before I lean back in my creaky desk chair, letting my hands fall into my lap. It's yet another rejection. My misguided hope immediately abandons me, replaced by emptiness and despair. Dejected, I sigh and crumple up the letter, dropping it into the small garbage can with the 7 other rejections I've already received from banks and lending agencies throughout Baltimore. Their heartless responses contain an undeniable truth. I desperately need help, the kind of help only banks can give, and I'm not going to get it anytime soon. It's absurd to think they would care about anything other than their bottom line. I know this. All that matters to these big banks is that I have nothing to offer them in return. So why does every rejection letter cut so deep? To these banks, I'm just another college dropout. On paper, they're right. I have a dead-end job, a boatload of bills I can't afford to pay, and no collateral to speak of. They have no reason to help me, no sense of humanity. And yet, what else can I do but try? On my desk, the candle's tiny flame pulses vigorously, letting the late-night shadows creep closer. The wick slowly drowns in the puddle of wax, sputtering and fighting to stay alive. This is my last one, and without electricity, it's my only source of light. It will burn out soon, I know, leaving me to stumble through my studio apartment in the dark as I have done so many nights before. I can't help but resonate with the irony of the flame's struggle. I'm burning out too. The weight of the day's exhaustion sets in, blurring my vision. With a sigh, I rub my tired eyes. Finding them dry beneath my fingers, a hollow laugh escapes me. Was it the second or third letter that depleted my tears? Honestly, I'm not sure anymore. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. I tear my eyes away from the reminders of my failure, reluctantly accepting there's nothing more to do about my finances tonight. It takes a monumental effort to force myself to stand. My aching muscles rebel and throb with my movements, but I ignore them and carry the flickering candle over to the tiny bathroom, allowing my mind to wander through the events of the day. I've spent entirely too much time on my feet between this morning's long shift and my trip to the hospital to visit Mom. The hours that passed sitting by her side were anything but peaceful. I argued with 3 different doctors about how to treat her cancer, walking in and out of the surgical recovery room so many times I now know precisely how many steps it takes to get from the uncomfortable chair to the hall and back again. Of course, each one of them, despite barely knowing her, had been absolutely certain their chosen course of treatment, or lack thereof, was the only correct option. Their cool confidence was annoying, but I listened to them ramble on anyway, one after another, nodding my head at the appropriate times and telling them I would take their suggestions into consideration. I know the truth. Ultimately, none of them care what happens to her. Valerie Edwards is a name on a chart, a means to collect their ridiculously expensive fees before moving on to the next patient. As Mom slept deeply in the hospital bed, blissfully ignorant and sedated, I spent more than an hour of frustration on the phone with the gas and electric company trying to work out a payment plan. Despite my protests that the winter temperatures had been far too low to cut off someone's heat, they refused to accept anything less than a 50% payment of the past due balance. Their willingness to meet me halfway aside, I won't have the money until my next paycheck clears, and even that's questionable. There simply isn't enough money to go around. The pantry in our tiny kitchen is almost bare. The apartment is a mess, and I have no time or energy to clean it. The laundry is dirty, and I ran out of quarters last week. My entire existence is a hopeless black void. I drag my thin sweater over my head, tug off my jeans, toss them into the hamper, and slip into a pair of ragged sweatpants and a t-shirt before the chilly air can raise goosebumps along my arms. My pajamas are old and not much to look at, but they're warm and comfortable, and tonight, that's what I need. When I finish changing, I pop a rubber plug into the sink and pour a splash of water from a nearly empty gallon jug into the basin. How long have I been without water now? 2 weeks? 3? I dip my toothbrush into the bowl and dab a small pearl of toothpaste onto it. As I brush my teeth, I watch myself in the mirror. My face has changed significantly over the last year. Tired green eyes stare back at me, sunken into dark black circles and streaked with thin red lines. My skin is pale, much paler than it should be, and the angles of my cheekbones are sharp. I've lost quite a bit of weight. My shoulder-length brown hair is in desperate need of a trim and a good brushing. In essence, I reflect every bit of the stressed and depressed young woman I've become. I used to care so much more about my appearance. I don't anymore. Time has brought different priorities and vanity has been set aside. Looking away from the ghost of myself, I spit my toothpaste into the toilet, dip a paper cup into the sink, and rinse my mouth, then wash my hands with an old bar of unscented soap. Finished, I pull the plug and stare as the rest of the water drains away. Tomorrow, I'll have to try to stop over and visit Connor so I can take a shower at his place. I feel gross for going so long without one, and terrible for using my best friend, but I'm also thankful he's kind enough to help me while I struggle with all these bills. He's the only one who does these days. Connor and his younger sister Allie don't have much either, but their apartment is warm and their water is running. Compared to my rundown studio, their place is a luxury hotel. For a moment, I imagine Connor sitting in his salvaged lawn chair and playing Call of Duty, while Allie sprawls out on the thick windowsill and scrolls through TikTok. I wish I could be there with them now. My apartment is too quiet with Mom in the hospital. It leaves far too much time to think about all of the stressful things dragging me down, and that's the last thing I want to do. I walk back into the living room and blow out the candle. Only a sliver of wick remains. It won't relight again after tonight, so I toss the stub into the garbage. Careful not to trip, I pad over to my lumpy futon and lay down, tucking myself snugly under the old quilt. It's full of holes after all these years, and it's not very warm anymore, but at least the quilt still smells faintly of Mom's perfume. A brief smile flits across my face as I remember the days she spent stitching the patchwork together in her recliner. That fall, she gathered up my old school t-shirts and a set of used curtains from the thrift store, cut them into squares, and sewed the pieces together. We still had our little row house on Fleet Street back then. Mom spent hours working on the quilt every night, and I, about 13 at the time, regaled her with tales of whatever I deemed important that day. One time, I prattled on and on about the bucket drummer I'd seen playing for tips in the Inner Harbor on my class trip to the National Aquarium. I remember telling her that someday I wanted to be a musician too. We both knew I was extremely tone deaf, and I couldn't hold a rhythm if my life depended on it, though. Mom laughed without saying a word, and I joined in with her. Then she pulled me into a tight hug and told me to always remember to follow my dreams. I rarely allow myself to dream anymore. The row house was one of the first things to disappear when she was diagnosed with cancer. After her treatments, Mom couldn't climb the stairs to her bedroom anymore, and the rent was too expensive with all the added medical bills. So we gave up the lease and moved into this tiny studio together. This hole in the wall is all the way up on the 7th floor, but the rent is cheap and there's an elevator, so the two of us have managed to make do. Still, there isn't a day I don't miss the way things were before. I pull the quilt tightly up to my chin as the wind whistles through the crack in the window frame above my head. It's going to be another cold night. The forecast calls for a low of 35 degrees, and the heat has been out for almost a week. Chapter 2. The night is still a deep shade of purple when the shrill ring of my phone rips me from the grip of a horrendous nightmare. With a start, I bolt upright and clutch the quilt tightly to my chest. Reality settles in slowly, separating the terrifying images from the cool, dark room around me. As the fog of sleep fades away, I focus on my ragged breathing to calm my racing heart and bring sensation back to my frozen limbs. It takes a few moments to regain my composure. Flashes of the dream continue to seep through, staggering blindly through inky darkness over abandoned wheelchairs, IV poles, and hospital beds. The biting scent of bleach and disinfectant, grotesque creatures with transparent skin and vibrant blue veins cornering me up against an immovable steel door. But that hadn't been the worst of it. The worst had been finding Mom's putrefied corpse in the center of the crisp white room, unbreathing, with tubes dangling from her sides. I tried desperately to rush to her aid, only to wind up bound by restraints that bit into my wrists and ankles, holding me back. The creatures finally caught up to me, thrusting my body against the glass of the window pane on the far wall until it shattered and gave way. My broken and bruised body crashed to the pavement. The blood that poured out of my lacerated skin ran across the surface beneath me, forming a sharply angled symbol. It called to me, commanding me to keep my eyes on the shining maroon wetness. I resisted the pull, knowing I had to put myself together to get up off the ground and back to Mom's room. I managed to drag my eyes away, but when I cast them back to the window, there was Mom. Her frail frame cast a long shadow onto the ground below. Mom's features were twisted. Her once beautiful smile had morphed into a perverse grin. Her sharp teeth glinted under the light of the moon, and thick scarlet blood dripped down to land on my cheek. She had become one of the creatures. I sniff and wipe away the tears that had fallen in my sleep. My throat's raw as though I'd been screaming, and maybe I was. After a dream like that, it wouldn't surprise me one bit. It had been so real, and even though I know it was only a dream, goosebumps still prickle my skin. Unconsciously, I rubbed my wrists where the imaginary restraints had dug in. There are no cuts or bruises, but the pressure remains all the same. I'd been helpless in my dream, completely unable to save Mom. My single greatest fear had been realized. The quiet chime of a voicemail breaks the tense silence of the room, drawing my gaze to the desk where my phone rests, blinking. Reluctantly, I reach down to toss the quilt aside. My fingers skim across the cold, soggy fabric. For a moment, I'm confused. Then a deafening boom and a flash of light answer my unspoken question. A thunderstorm rages outside. I lift my gaze to the broken window above the bed. Rivulets of water run down the wall until they pool on my pillow and soak into the mattress and blanket below. It must have been raining for a while, because the entire futon is drenched. It makes a suctiony sloshing sound as I push myself up to stand. The bright white numbers on the lock screen of my phone read 3:30 a.m. It's been a handful of hours since I tucked myself into bed and succumbed to the weight of sleep. Next to the clock, the little voicemail symbol flashes red, and beneath the symbol is a number I don't want to see. Dr. Nicholas Mitchell, St. John's Hospital. I hesitate. No one should be calling at this time of night, and after the dream I had, seeing a call from the hospital fills my veins with icy fear. What if something's wrong? What if Mom's gone? Calls from Dr. Mitchell at 3:30 in the morning do not bode well. The last time something like this happened, Mom had been rushed into surgery. Her lung had collapsed. If something like that's happening again, what are the chances she might survive? Whatever is in this voicemail, I'm certain it won't be good news. I reach for the phone with shaking hands and fumble to unlock the screen. Taking a deep breath, I will myself to be strong and bring my phone up to my ear. Dr. Mitchell's tired voice crackles through the speaker. Miss Edwards, this is Dr. Mitchell calling from St. John's Hospital, Baltimore. I need to speak with you as soon as possible regarding your mother's recent surgery. Please come as soon as you get this message. There are important forms for you to sign, and this matter cannot wait. I won't discuss it over the phone. Click. Silence. Without hesitation, I grab my keys, throw on my shoes, and lock the apartment door behind me as I run out into the night. Chapter 3. Although it takes 15 minutes to make the drive from the apartment to St. John's, my anxiety stretches the trip into hours. The abysmal weather does nothing to help. Freezing rain has left the roads as slick as glass, and my car, in dire need of new tires, struggles to find the slightest hint of traction as it skids around tight corners. Luckily, there isn't much traffic at this time of night, even in a big city like Baltimore. Silently, I thank the universe for clearing the way and press harder on the gas. When my car skates around the last bend, the white concrete of St. John's Hospital slides into view. The enormous structure hulks over the much smaller historical buildings of the surrounding neighborhood. With a light tap on the brakes, I slow to a reasonable pace to pass an ambulance as it unloads its human cargo in the loop and turn into the connected parking garage, a structure of 4 wide floors that stretches out from the side. The bottom levels are completely packed, so I loop around until I find my way to the top. It's remarkably empty, probably because no one wanted to deal with the snow or worry about climbing stairs coated with ice. If I wasn't so worried, I might have laughed at the realization the hospital could easily drum up more business by skimping on salt. I'm sure any number of people have fallen on their ascent and wound up being wheeled inside on a stretcher. A vacant spot beneath the hospital's overhanging roof catches my eye. It's conveniently close to the stairs and free of wintry debris, having been shielded from the worst of the storm. I slip my car into the compact space and throw it into park before slowly peeling my fingers away from the steering wheel. My hands shake, white-knuckled and stiff from the tension of the drive. A combination of fear and cold has left them numb. The clock on the dash blinks 3:52 a.m. Looking up, I catch sight of myself in the rearview mirror. The wild eyes and matted hair of the woman staring back at me remind me of something feral. I can't walk into the hospital looking like this. My entire life may be a mess, but the doctors don't need to see that. Personal experience has taught me that young people like me are dismissed far too easily. At 21, any sign of weakness might make them think I can't be trusted to care for Mom. Worst case scenario, what harm could a 21-year-old do to a hospital like St. John's if they accidentally let my mother die and stop pursuing her treatments altogether? I hadn't bothered to stop and change before rushing out the door, and that might already be a huge mistake. My ratty pajamas project an image far from the capable daughter I want them to see. There's no hairbrush in the car either. There are, however, a handful of velvety scrunchies wrapped around the shifter's base. I snatch one of these and use my nails to drag my hair out of my face and up into a messy bun. At most, it's a feeble attempt to make myself look put together, but given current circumstances, it's the best I'm going to do. I'll have to put on my toughest face and pretend I know exactly what I'm doing, hide my panic, and reassure the world everything will be fine. I've been doing it for 2 years. I should be able to get it together and push through one more night. You can do this, I whispered to my reflection. Never let them see you cry. Putting on a mask is far from a new concept for me. I've been doing it since I was a child, and in these years since Mom's diagnosis, there have been times I've come close to forgetting I'm not the cold young woman I've been pretending to be. There isn't anyone else to step up and help me take care of Mom. She and I are effectively alone. Richard, my father, left when I was only 6. One night he was there, and the next morning he was gone. As far as I know, he's never contacted Mom again. Clearly, he's not breaking down the door to help anyone, and I don't have the time to track him down. I'd only be disappointed if I tried. When it comes to him, all I have to cling to are broken memories. The last time I remember seeing my father was in our little row house. It was night, and my parents were in the kitchen arguing in hushed tones. I was supposed to be asleep, but I had gotten out of bed to ask for a glass of water, as children often do. Something about the way they spoke to each other made me pause and watch from the hall. Richard looked defeated, and Mom was livid. I remember trying to make out what they were saying to each other, but no matter how hard I listened, I couldn't catch on. Mom was never one to mince words. I would hazard a guess she probably used some harsh language and told Richard to stick something somewhere the sun doesn't shine. She and I are very alike in that way. Many times when I was growing up, the two of us bickered so intensely that we couldn't stand each other. Now I long, for those days when Mom was healthy and strong. The next day when I woke up and rolled out of bed, things felt strange, but I couldn't figure out why. I went downstairs to make myself a bowl of cereal. To do that, I had to climb up on my special step stool to get the box, and when I happened to look out our little kitchen window, I saw Richard's car was gone. Its absence wasn't unusual since he sometimes worked early shifts on the weekends, but what was odd was that he hadn't mentioned it to me the day before. Richard always told me when he had to work on the weekends and what time he would be home because I was a daddy's girl through and through. I worried about him every time he was away. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. I remember going to wake Mom up to ask where he was, but when I walked into her room, she was already awake. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. She was leaning against the headboard, knees propping up her elbows, and staring at the open closet door. Her face had been so blank, and her cheeks were streaked with tears. I followed her gaze across the room. Half of the closet was empty. The drawers in the dresser next to it had been thrown open, and clothes were left hanging off of them. Richard's watch wasn't in the jewelry bowl. In fact, I couldn't see anything left in the room that belonged to him. Even at 6 years old, I knew better than to ask what had happened. My friends had divorced parents. The signs were there. Richard was gone, and he wasn't coming back. At first, Mom didn't acknowledge my presence. She was too lost in her thoughts and misery. I didn't know what I could do to help, so I went back down to the kitchen and poured 2 bowls of cereal, then took them both upstairs. Silently, I deposited her bowl in the nightstand. I sat beside her for a while. When she didn't talk to me, I leaned over and planted a kiss on her shoulder, and took my bowl back to my room. My sister was still sound asleep in the adjacent bed. Later that day, I carried my empty bowl back to my parents' room, intending to take Mom's down to the sink alongside my own. But when I went to pick it up, I found she hadn't eaten any of it. Carefully, I collected the soggy cereal from the table and dumped it out in the kitchen sink before finally sitting down in the middle of the floor and crying, all alone. It took a few days for her to snap back to reality. Though I'm certain Mom knows what happened, and though I've asked for answers repeatedly over the last 15 years, her lips remained tightly sealed. The only answer she's given is that sometimes things get in the way and that someday I would come to understand. In high school, I decided she must have meant Richard left because he met another woman. It seemed like the only logical explanation given her reluctance to tell me anything about that night. Then again, Richard and Valerie married when she was only 20 years old. After that, she never imagined her life without him. She told me so herself many times. Maybe the situation was simply too painful to discuss. I can imagine it would be like pouring salt into a fresh wound each time. Regardless, I stopped searching for answers and hoping the door would magically open to reveal him on the other side. The devastation Mom so clearly felt because of his absence was terrible to witness, especially as a child. Hot tears burned my eyes as I recall how she used to sit and stare at her wedding ring, the one I now wear on my right hand. For a long time after he left, she kept it tucked away in her jewelry box and only took it out when she thought she was alone. And that's where I'll pause for now.
That's incredible. Wow. Thank you so much for that great reading. I was falling into your story very deeply. Thank you so much. That was so much fun.
Welcome.
You told me something in Green Room I'd like you to share with everybody, and that is your main character, Kara. She has a special day today.
She does. Yeah, today is her birthday.
Birthday
May
and release
16th.
day for the book. Was that something you
Yes,
planned ahead of time?
kind of. I mean, I knew when her birthday was, but the funny part is I asked my husband, when do I need to put this world or this book out into the world? And he said, pick a Tuesday in May. And I was like, okay, well, not this Tuesday or that Tuesday. So these are the ones you have left. And he picked May 16th, and that just happened to be Kara's birthday.
And you didn't share that with him ahead of time? That's
Nope,
fantastic.
he's psychic, I think.
That's wonderful. What was the hardest part for you in writing this story?
Well, the hardest part for me in writing in general is just kind of getting out of my own way. Imposter syndrome is an incredibly powerful thing. Feeling
Yes.
like your words will never be good enough or no one will ever want to read them. And that's why The Ruin actually took me 6 years to write, because I kept starting and stopping. But as far as the content of the story goes, I have several people in my life who have passed away from cancer. And so I've drawn experiences of my time spent with these people while they were ill and put them into the story itself, alongside with the research that I've done. And I kept feeling like I was right back there with them. And that was really hard too. The kind of love and devotion that Kara feels for her mom can only really be portrayed, I think, through the experience of loving someone through a situation like that.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
it was
it's
a lot
hard
of
to
memories.
it's hard to write something like that without having direct experience from it. It's hard to imagine what that might be like.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your most joyful part of writing this story?
Well, when I finally finished it, for one thing, so I never thought that was going to happen. There were so many times I was like, I'm going to throw it on the fire. This book is terrible,
Yeah, I've been
and then my
there.
husband, John's like, go get your laptop. Let's go. We need to finish this book.
Yeah.
So that was nice. But then also watching the main character, grow from this 21-year-old girl whose only motivation is to save mom, and start kind of seeing like there's more to life than just one person that you love, and like realizing how many other people are there that love her, and watching her become stronger and stronger. Like that was really fun, because a lot of my characters have big pieces of me in them too. So it was like watching me grow.
That's very cool. For you to have that introspective piece as you're writing, I think that's a very cool element. I'm so glad you came on the program. Thank you so much for sharing your writing. And I know you have 3 other books. Will you come back and read for us again?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
That would be great. I look forward to seeing you again. Have a wonderful night and happy release day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.